Hello, and welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, TJ Mabardi. We have a surprising amount of news coming both from the NFL and the NBA in terms of coaching changes. So we will be touching on that today. But first, we are going to talk about the San Francisco 49ers, who are hosting the NFC Championship game this week after somewhat of a shaky performance against a much younger and lower expectation Green Bay Packers team. So, we are going to be answering the question of should the 49ers be worried after their close call. We're then going to be giving a broad update on the NFL coaching carousel before continuing that coaching trend into the third segment, where we will be talking about the breaking news of the Milwaukee Bucks yesterday firing their head coach during the season and then replacing him with an NBA legend. And then in our final segment, we're going to be talking about none other than the Los Angeles Lakers. I haven't had a chance to talk about them just yet. They just lost their game last night to fall back under 500. So we are going to talk about what they need to do to turn their season around. Before we get into the show, please remember to like and follow. And for any of your live questions, use the link that is streaming across the bottom ticker. That is streamelements.com/GSMC Sports Network./tip. So without further ado, getting into our first segment here in the San Francisco 49ers and whether or not they should be worried for their upcoming matchup about the Detroit Lions. And during the next 2 days, we are going to be talking about the specific matchup and the preview of their game coming up against the Lions. But before we do that, I wanted to just sort of come back around on their performance from last Saturday, because I talked about it some in the show on Monday, but I was very much taken aback about how the 49ers performed then. I thought that they were outplayed for a large portion of that game. And now, if you didn't watch the game and if you were to go look at the box score and the team stats, you could come at me with plenty of stats that would say that I'm wrong. And that was something that I sort of noticed looking back on this game, is you really wouldn't be able to tell that the Packers did outperform the 49ers, but I trust my eyes. I saw what I saw. I thought that the Packers left a lot of opportunities on the field, and had they not, I think that this very easily could have been a Green Bay Packers Detroit Lions NFC Championship. Now, the Packers, they were just 2-5 in the red zone. They had a lot of dropped interceptions. Those interceptions coming off of the fact that Brock Purdy really didn't seem too comfortable throughout the course of the game. We covered it before, and a lot of people have covered it at this point. The whole glove debacle, whether or not he was going to wear one, because the weather was bad in San Francisco. It was a very sloppy game. I don't think necessarily from the play itself, but you had defenders falling all over the place that actually helped lead to, on one of the worst cases of it, the Green Bay Packers getting a wide open receiver in the back of the end zone for a touchdown. So it was happening all throughout the game, but it seemed like Brock Purdy especially was sort of struggling with this weather. Now, we saw him in different circumstances because of the fact that just about everybody was going down in the game against the Cleveland Browns during the regular season, when a lot of people first started sort of having their doubts with Brock Purdy and with this 49ers team. Now, he somewhat dealt with it just by the fact that Deebo Samuel, their number one receiver, did leave early in that game and was not a factor due to a couple different injuries. It seemed like at first it was a head injury, and then it was a shoulder injury. So Debo is obviously a huge factor for this team, and especially as Greg Olsen pointed out on the broadcast, when you're game planning to have your best receiver for 2 weeks and you lose him within the first drive or so, it is very hard to overcome that. So credit to the 49ers for being able to do so. I think that Kyle Shanahan, another person that, obviously has a big reputation due to his offensive style. Some of the matchups between him and McVay, it seemed that these are some of the best offensive minds. Mike McDaniel, all of these guys come from the same coaching tree, so it makes sense that they have very similar styles and that they are all so well perceived, I should say. But the Packers had this game. They had the 49ers, you could say on the ropes, but not quite. They had a 4-point lead. They were up 21-17 against the 49ers, driving down the field. They had the ball on the San Francisco 23-yard line with 6:21 left. They lined up to San Francisco held up. So again, credit to them. The Packers lined up for a 41-yard field goal, but they missed that, and it just seems like any time, especially come the playoffs, you miss those important kicks, they are going to come back to hurt you. Brock Purdy then leads the 12-play, 69-yard touchdown drive for the 49ers to take the 3-point lead. And then after that final Jordan Love interception, the 49ers came out on top. So it sort of feels like the 49ers escaped the game there for a Packers team that, again, they probably weren't even supposed to be there. They weren't supposed to be in that game even necessarily as far as a competition standpoint. I mean, they were over a touchdown underdog against the Dallas Cowboys. I think it closed at 7.5. And then going into this game, they were 9.5-point underdogs against the 49ers. And again, I think that you can absolutely make the argument that they should have won that game. It feels like it got away from them. That being said, it is the Niners coming out on top, so you have to give them some credit there. Shanahan finally getting the win after 31 games. He was 0-30 in games that his team was trailing by at least 7 points entering the fourth quarter. They pull off that comeback, get that monkey off of his back, and they advance to, again, host an NFC Championship game, which these appearances have been very common under Kyle Shanahan-led 49ers teams. So the Detroit Lions are going to be coming into Levi's Stadium to try and make the first Super Bowl appearance in Detroit Lions history. So they're going to be hungry. Dan Campbell, I think, is an excellent leader. And you can absolutely make the argument that now, after sort of having all this momentum and getting to this spot, that they could come out a little bit flat. But I don't think that a Dan Campbell-led team will come out flat in a moment like this. I think that they are really rolling. They're really feeling themselves. I think that their win against the Rams in the wild card round is honestly one of the most impressive wins so far in the postseason up to this point. So the 49ers are going to have a lot on their hands, absolutely. So I wanted to look into some of the keys. Again, we'll be getting into the full-blown preview as the week goes on, but just for San Francisco here, the first of which being sort of the elephant in the room, is Deebo Samuel going to be able to play? Now, like I mentioned, head injury early and then with a shoulder injury that kept him out for the rest of the game. Now, they have already came out and said that Deebo, he avoided any sort of a fracture or serious injury in that sense. But as of today, on Wednesday, January 24th, he is listed as questionable for the game this weekend. Game plan wise, I do think that at least now they can prepare for the possibility of not having him and almost getting away with having that in-game loss last week and still being able to overcome it. I think that was the harder task necessarily than coming into this week knowing that he might not play, or even if he does, he might be limited. Again, I think that Greg Olsen should deserve a ton of credit for how good of an announcer he's been in these situations, because he's pointing out on jet sweeps and such for Jauan Jennings that they very likely chance was that was supposed to be Deebo Samuel taking those types of plays, and now they're trying to plug in different players in that Deebo slot. And Jauan Jennings is a nice player. He had a pretty solid game, I thought, this past Saturday, I should say, but he's not Deebo Samuel, and not many people are, so that's not necessarily an insult to him. But again, I think that it speaks to the perseverance of this 49ers team, which you have to give them credit for. And then I think that so it goes without being said that not having Deebo Samuel would be a tremendous loss for this 49ers team, especially when you're playing against a Lions team that they have a very high-powered offense as well. So these two teams both can put points on the boards. Deebo Samuel has been a large part of that. You just hope that he's going to be able to play. Now, another factor, I alluded to it as a reason why I think that Brock Purdy wasn't on his A game, the weather. And, maybe it's unfair to sort of make up this reoccurring theme that Purdy can't play well in the weather. Recent examples would possibly show that is the case, but truthfully, it's such a small sample size, and there are also so many other factors when you talk about